Hello and welcome to RSA Security ongoing information session on RSA's authentication portfolio. This is delivered as an ongoing webinar, and the content that you're about to see was last delivered on February 11th, 2016. RSA will rerun these every quarter in order to ensure that our customers are abreast of the latest changes in our portfolio and broader trends in the industry. My name is Craig Dorr, and I'm the authentication lead for authentication solutions across Australia and New Zealand. This presentation is going to cover two major topics. The first is what's latest in our security platform called Authentication Manager. And then I'm going to delve into RSA's new technologies that are the answer to latest trends in cloud, mobility, and single sign-on. And let's just get started. But before we do, I am required by RSA Marketing to show this slide, dealing with forward-looking statements because some of the content relates to products or features that have not been released yet. And also before I begin, I just want to recap across Authentication Manager's general value. We have essentially 4 pillars of strength with respect to what Authentication Manager brings to our customers. And the first deals with choice. Auth Manager contains tons of choice with respect to the authentication methods that users will use on a daily basis. And this ranges from your traditional hardware token to software token to SMS tokens and even risk-based authentication. And mixing and matching these types of auth methods means that users buy into the security a little bit easier. Also, experience, both from a user perspective and administrator perspective. We have designed our tokens to be as easy to use as possible while still maintaining a high degree of security. And then on the administrative side, we provide a high level of automation to the product and allow it to be simply expanded and deployed very rapidly. The third cornerstone of our value includes the RSA Partner Program, or RSA Security Ready. We have hundreds of partners with thousands of products that are certified, tested, and documented through our partner program. And in fact, we provide software code such that each vendor has the option to bake security functionality into their products, such that when you get them in your hands, you don't actually have to do anything. The result is as plug and play as security can get. And then finally, just more holistically, the total cost of ownership of the platform. Over its long life, you can be sure it's going to grow with you, meaning that new use cases will always be supported and that tokens can be used everywhere without actually needing to pay more for them. Also baked in is self-service options like emergency access for when you forget your token. And then, of course, low administrative burden with respect to the amount of automation and then the nice-to-haves within the platform that make it just simply easy to use. So those are the 4 cornerstones of Auth Manager's value. And now I'd like to take you through RSA Security general value, meaning that we have been around for 25 years. And as the leaders in authentication, according to Gartner, and 50,000 customers worldwide, we are here to stay. Also, with the backing of EMC Corporation, we have a solid foundation from which to work with, and we're going to be around for a long, long while. Also, I'd like to remind those who have not upgraded to version 8 of Authentication Manager, it's been a few years since it's been in the market, and the response has been tremendous. People have said that this is the best release from RSA they've ever seen. And so if you haven't experienced AM8, you would probably enjoy the level of stability and reliability that is included inside of AM8, and including an enhanced replication engine and embracing virtualization, meaning that we've released the appliance as a virtual appliance, supporting both VMware and Hyper-V. Also in AM8, besides all of the improvements in the UI and the ease of use capability, we've added a risk engine, allowing you to use risk factors and behavioral indexes to deliver strong authentication without actually using tokens. Our largest customer worldwide is 65,000 doctors and nurses here in Queensland using tokenless strong authentication. But now it's here today. And what's new in our next release, which we're calling 8.2? This will be released at the end of Q2 of 2016. And it includes several themes, and that's the way we like to communicate it. It's essentially several streams of enhancements with respect to our new product. And the first is around security. And we'll drill into some of these as we go. But the security enhancement includes official FIPS compliance and working towards full achievement of that, and also responses to new PCI directives, and an implementation of IPv6, meaning that interior components will all be using IPv6 for organizations who are already using it. The second stream is around simplicity. So we've done some great work around software token provisioning to make them even easier for administrators and users. And then some nice to haves like alerting and dashboarding. And I'll get into those in just a moment. The third stream deals with scalability. So we're adding a utility called AMBA that a lot of people have purchased from our pro services group in the past. Well, now we're adding it to the enterprise version of the product. And I'll get into more of that later. And then we're doing some additional identity source qualifications. And again, I'll be more specific in a moment. Finally, seamlessness, which is a lot harder to say than it is to read. But we are adding the workflow capability of Authentication Manager for all license types. And that means that base license users and enterprise license users will be able to use workflow automation in the management and provisioning of tokens. And also we've added some enhancements to the agents themselves, meaning that it will use RSA's companion product, RSA VIA, in order to authenticate users. And I will get into that very specifically in the second half of the presentation. But firstly, these are a collection of the ones that I'm calling out as the most important bits. And it's certainly important for a lot of our customers to comply with PCI. Well, recently, PCI has issued a new directive relating to SSL v3. And in fact, it is effectively, thou shalt not use SSL v3 anymore. So we are responding to that directive and kicking out SSL v3 from our products and adding in TLS v 1.2 enforced. And this coincides with some deeper improvements in the underlying crypto libraries and also the underlying operating system of the virtual appliance itself running SUSE Linux. And then it's a good thing that they brought cookies to this PCI audit, as you see in the image there. And this one is the coolest one, I think, really related to how software tokens are expired. You see, historically, when someone has a software token on their mobile phone and it expires, they actually have to be re-provisioned a whole new token every time. And this can lead to a bit of a burden both for the administrator and the user. In version 8.2, what we are implementing is the ability to expire tokens only on the server side, meaning that the user would never even know that their token has expired and it doesn't need to be re-provisioned. You essentially extend the life of a token over a specified period, or ad infinitum if you like. Coupled with this is the idea that we will have automated expiry alerts that can be configured to go to either the users or the admins to alert them of imminent expiry. And we put that in terms of no more surprises. I'd like to caveat this feature, as cool as it is, that expiry sometimes is a good thing, meaning that it gives the administrator the opportunity to review whether that given user needs that token or the access it provides. So sometimes it's good to have that reminder, but as stated, the server-side expiry is just an option, and you can use it and employ it or not. Another feature that we'll get into is what I mentioned earlier around something called AMBA. Now, for those not familiar, AMBA is referred to as Auth Manager Bulk Administration, and it's a command line utility that can perform huge operations across every user within the deployment. And that means that of the 80 functions or so available, it can facilitate mass token provisioning, or doing a domain change on a collection of user, or resetting all of their pins. things that need a lot of sort of manual effort in the past are all automated with the AMBA utility. And so now users or customers who are using the enterprise license now get AMBA free of charge. So that's very exciting for enterprise users who may not have been aware of AMBA or did not want to pay for it. But do the enterprise license holders get all the love? The answer is no. Even the base license holders get some love here. And what I mean is the automated token workflows dealing with software and hardware tokens are now available for all license types. This function was previously only available for enterprise license holders. And these automated provisioning methods are actually more secure because rather than transporting a static seed around to end users in the software token case, they're actually dynamically generated when they're installed on the mobile handset. And that means that you're not actually sending security information over insecure networks like email. Also coupled to this is, well, I mean, I've just described a means of getting a token via the protocol referred to in quotes as CTKIP and or QR codes that are basically an embodiment of the CTKIP methodology. And these are all delivered through the self-service portal built into the product. We highly recommend using CTKIP or QR codes for all software tokens. But there's automated workflows around the token distribution, and I'm sure that many people will enjoy the enhancement that we've released. Also, a dashboard with respect to a nice to have. So we've added just little things that make day-to-day life a little bit easier. So for example, if you're familiar with the AM home screen and this quick search bar, we've now added the ability to search both on last name, as you traditionally can, and also user ID and user alias. I use this all the time, and I've always wanted to search on user ID, and now I can. As stated, it's a nice to have, a little enhancement that makes your day-to-day life easier. And also, I'll just show you a screenshot. If you look at all the way over to the right, we now have that option of having an extendable software token, meaning you can just renew it server-side, post-expiry, and the user never even knows. So as stated, these are just nice-to-haves that make life easier for you. And then another nice-to-have is, well, in large deployments, and depending on the type of report that you're running, it can take quite a long time. And what it would mean is that an administrator would actually continually have to check to see if that report had finished. Well, now, when the report run is complete in 8.2, an email can be configured to automatically send designates a link to the report when it's done. And that means that it's just a link back to the Authentication Manager Administrative GUI straight to the report. And it's just kind of a nice to have that actually releases someone from the burden of having to check to see if the report is finished. And then you go and do whatever it is that you do with the reports. Also, I mentioned additional identity sources. So historically, we've supported, as you expect, Active Directory and others, Radiant Logic and Oracle Internet Directory and so forth. But it's also nice to see that we're continuing to support additional identity sources. So that includes the open source Open LDAP identity source, and then also Microsoft's AD LDS and Oracle OUD. So it's nice to see that continuing along those lines. And that's kind of a wrap-up of the big parts of 8.2. 8.2 includes some other enhancements as well, but I feel like these are the most exciting ones. Now moving on to the next part of the conversation, and that's related to cloud. Now, I know a lot of organizations are moving to cloud, or ones that you wouldn't even expect are moving to cloud, such as banks and so on. And is RSA prepared to help you from a security perspective or an identity perspective there? And of course, the answer is yes. But before we begin and get into that, I'm going to just cover it on a sort of a broad perspective. And this is today's enterprise. And this may be even true for you right now. You might be in a room where there are people with tablets who are looking at their email or accessing Salesforce, people using mobile phones to access corporate information. And this is all kind of just organically happened, exploded. Then we all know that this is the case, but what is security doing about it? Now, in many cases, they might implement a solution here or a solution there, but a lot of the time, organizations have individual business units who are running around central IT and bypassing all the controls, checks, and policies that are in place to protect corporate assets. Well, we refer to that as shadow IT. And then from a compliance perspective, being able to have that visibility and control over users using external cloud, either from an infrastructure perspective or an application perspective, is super important, especially when you need to prove that you're enacting security controls in the best interests of audit, compliance, or just security. Enter the question around all of these concepts. So covering everything from broad authentication to federation, single sign-on, all the way into more user identity questions related to what does the user have access to? What is their role? Are they changing their role? And the idea of fulfilling the correct level of access based on policy, and then being able to report on it, have visibility over it. So those are two, broad drivers: securing the access and achieving compliance. And those two things are brought together under what we're calling RSA VIA. RSA VIA is a broad umbrella that covers three fundamental components. The first is VIA access, and that refers to the authentication equation with respect to cloud. Also, we are providing a broader user identity platform referred to as VIA Lifecycle. And that handles entitlements and provisioning of users both on-premise and in the cloud. And then coupled with that is something called VIA Governance. And it is, as what you would expect, essentially ensuring that the policies and actions in place within the other two solutions comply with requirements in terms of governance. So these are all brought together under the RSA VIA brand. And this is what we refer to as the smart identity solution that protects everything from on-premise to cloud. And I'll define VIA access specifically in just a moment. But holistically, these are an answer to cloud-based access and the challenges that organizations experience with respect to both that shadow IT problem and then broader comprehensive adherence to audit requirements and so on. Proving that you are compliant across cloud and on-premise is a huge problem. VIA access, governance, and lifecycle are all designed to work together in order to provide that functionality. So these are two basically disparate goals, if you will, where the end user must get easy access on a day-to-day basis. If it's too hard, they won't use it. RSA VIA provides that easy level of access for users using cloud, web, and mobile. But from the other side of the coin, the CIO and his or her responsibility with respect to compliance and visibility, RSA VIA provides that as well. So from a policy-based enforcement of this disrupted perimeter, if you will. RSA authentication solutions obviously span a few different products. And we've all well known Secure ID, but RSA VIA is going to be added to, or has been added to, this portfolio. And this is a cloud-based service that is authentication in the cloud for the cloud. And it delivers security around single sign-on to all of your traditional cloud-based applications, Office 365, Salesforce, and so on. But it also delivers on-premise security as well, with respect to, of course, on-premise web applications. And we do this, obviously, to answer all of those traditional questions: who can access, when, where, and the idea of delivering secure access control at the same time as doing single sign-on is what RSA VIA is designed to do, including federated protocols like SAML that allows single sign-on from one web application to another. This is all coupled with authentication application called RSA via Access that lives on a mobile phone. And it provides a whole set of multi-factor authentication methods that deliver fitness to purpose, meaning that the level of access you need, the more secure you need to be. And this is extended right out to the Secure ID token itself. I'm going to show you VIA just in action in a video that we've recorded that essentially shows it from the user experience, who first signs into a centralized portal that VIA Access provides. Once they sign in, they are actually shown the applications that they have access to. And this can include your traditional ones, Salesforce, and so on. When they attempt to sign in, an authentication is evaluated against that user to determine what they need to do. In this case, VIA includes an inbuilt OTP functionality, or one-time passcode, which they need to enter while reading it off a separate device. Once they authenticate, the system will ask them if they want to remember that device, much like Facebook's Remember Me functionality. And so the idea is that once they gain access, they've authenticated, now they can simply enjoy the application in question. But the centralized portal may actually guard against, let's say if they had admin access to another application, it might prompt them for a higher level of authentication. VIA Access also works straight from tablets as well. So the portal will be launched, and then it may actually require someone to use their fingerprint in order to authenticate to a particular service or application. And that's a demonstration, basically, that a whole set of different factors may be employed for gaining access to a certain application. And that pretty much covers off the very basics of RSA via Access. And we refer to it as secure, convenient access for any user from anywhere to anything. Now we'll get into the actual nitty-gritty of RSA via and how it works. And the first thing is just to define the enterprise. You might have protected assets together with an identity source and hopefully users in your organization. And hopefully maybe you have Auth Manager to protect those assets or remote access to them. Now the question is well, what happens when cloud is introduced to the equation? Authentication Manager does have solutions for federated access to cloud applications, but those are largely mediated through an agent that we produce for Microsoft Active Directory Federation Services, or ADFS. So we are relegated to the world of ADFS when just using Authentication Manager. But that's not true anymore, and you'll see why in a moment. But the idea of answering the question of external users or corporate users who are coming from within the corporate network or without, how do they access that particular application? In a strong, centralized kind of way. And that's where RSA via Access comes in. RSA via Access lives in the cloud and authenticates to the cloud and on-prem. And this is coupled with a small component that we refer to as the identity router, and that lives on-premise. And the purpose of the identity router is essentially to form a bridge between the identity source on-premise and the RSA via service in the cloud. It is also what you may characterize as a secure vault for credentials when users sign into these applications. And in fact, the user, neither RSA nor the user, might even know what the credential is. In some cases, using special protocols, they are actually shielded from that, and they're securely encrypted and archived on-prem within the identity router. A lot of web single sign-on products cannot do this, but RSA can. And the idea here is that, well, when coupled with the RSA via application on a mobile phone, you get access to a whole broad range of authentication methods. And this includes your traditional Touch ID or fingerprint, Samsung fingerprint, or the built-in OTP, or even a Secure ID token. So all of those are brought together under the VIA banner, allowing you dynamic access into cloud applications. And that's just part of the equation. I'm going to continue in this level of detail. Basically, from a perspective of how it works, a user signs into a central portal that is run within the identity router. And they authenticate it to it either using their AD credentials or even IWA or a special password. The idea here is that they are now evaluated against what their role is and what apps they have been provisioned for them. But it's also looking at the device they're coming in from, the network, and what they're doing within the session. So that means that it's looking at a whole set of factors that are invisible to the user. And what happens is that all those factors are evaluated in order to determine whether that they can get access based on, say, some policy, or do they need step-up authentication, where you would use the OTP function, a secure ID token, or Touch ID. Now, the picture that I've drawn here involves users stepping up and doing something, but it's only one part of the picture. If a user has elevated access for any application, they may be prompted for higher and higher levels of step-up authentication, meaning that let's say that you had an administrator accessing Salesforce from within Australia. You might have them just simply approve that application, which is another auth method that we produce. But if they leave Australia and they have administrator access to Salesforce, you might want them to get to use their fingerprint and or their token at the same time. And that means that you can actually mix and match auth methods based on their geolocation or their role within the app or from where they're coming in from or a whole manner of other types of factors. Taking together, basically all these auth methods are governed by a central policy that dictates the level of security. And then coupled with outputs to this solution means that you're actually gaining visibility over their access into these applications, bringing it all under one place for both compliance and ease of use. So that is via access plus via the other components, governance and lifecycle, to deliver single sign-on, and then obviously the policy based on role and user attributes and so on. A holistic end-to-end solution for cloud users. Now, with respect to via access interoperability with Authentication Manager, we can build a trust relationship between the via access solution and your Authentication Manager on-prem. So that means that secure ID tokens could be used within the context of via access. So you're not throwing away your investment in secure ID, if applicable. But what's even cooler is what I promised earlier with respect to via access's built-in OTP, is that within Auth Manager 8.2, secure ID agents themselves will support the via OTP function. And that means that if you are transiting into the via access world as a customer, that means that now even your interior assets that are traditionally protected by secure ID can be protected by via OTP, if that's good enough. In many cases, it's not. You want additional layers of security or an actual hardware token. But in the case that you don't, you can protect interior assets, such like VPN, to use the via OTP instead. So this is an excellent way to simplify implementations when you need to use both via and secure ID and not confuse your users. So this is a huge piece of the puzzle for us in terms of Auth Manager 8.2, and another reason why I saved it for the end. And the final bit is what we call via access revolution, or la revolution. And the idea here is that this is a program that we're running to enhance early adoption. And what that means is if you qualify for a set of criteria, you actually get 60 days free utilization of via access. And we will also provide free professional services in order to install and configure it for you. That means that you essentially get it in for free, configure it for up to 3 applications for free, and then use it for 60 days. So if you satisfy the requirements for this via access revolution, then you'll obviously enjoy the benefits of via access even more. And the idea here is that if you want more information around VIA access, we have a website, rsavia.com, where you can get more information. And now, since this was the content here dealt with a live webinar, we don't have any questions. But as stated, if you have any questions or you'd like to follow up on the topics, please reach out to me. I'm based in Australia. My name's Craig Dorr, and there is my email address. And thank you so much for making the time to watch this presentation, and we will wish you a good day and good quarter.